Nupsy, what are you doing, buddy? Good?
Very good.
So those are paleo, grain-free biscuits.
Very good.
Hey guys, Constance here from Cosmopolitan Cornbread. So I just got done brewing myself a mug of tea. Just black tea. I have lots of different kinds of teas, but I do find myself drawn to just good old black tea with a splash of half and half and a spoonful of honey, and that's just does it for me. So the biscuits that you just saw me making in the earlier part of this video were some gluten-free, grain-free paleo biscuits, and I'm already gonna have to make another batch because Mr. Smith has eaten most of them on me. Normally I like to keep a few biscuits like that in the freezer so that I can get up in the morning and I can just grab a couple out, thaw them out, and enjoy them for breakfast. And the reason I do that, of course, is because I am abiding by paleo guidelines, grain-free, gluten-free, and all that. So I don't indulge in baked goods as often as I would like because I just don't have them in the house. And so those biscuits are something, you know, that I can just grab out of the freezer. But it looks like Mr. Smith got more of them this time around. So I just want to take a minute to talk to you about something that I've had a couple of people now bring up and mention to me. And that is that they want to start a garden, they want to have a garden, but they're afraid to do it, that they are anxious, they're nervous, and ultimately they think they're going to fail. Here's the thing, don't be afraid of failure. When it comes to living on the homestead and all of the different things that we do around here, I have mentioned several times over the past couple of years that there is no such thing as failure when it comes to homesteading, because failure is going to happen. It doesn't matter how hard you try, how hard you push yourself, everybody's going to have some sort of failures, but if you look at them as failures, you're missing an opportunity. I even have an article that I wrote about this on my blog, cosmopolitancornbread.com, that basically if you homestead, you will fail. And I explain what I mean by that. When you are homesteading or when you have a garden, there are challenges that you are always going to face. And it doesn't matter how good you are, how experienced you are, everybody has something that they struggle with every year, and it changes from year to year. It always keeps you on your toes. For instance, this past year we had a huge, beautiful garden, but we'd had a really mild winter, and so because of that we had insects that we don't usually see until midsummer showing up in May. I had a situation where I thought I was going to lose every single bean plant because the Mexican bean beetles had shown up and other pests, and they were just devouring my beans. But I ended up doing a little bit of research, finding what I could use safely in an organic garden and researching the natural pesticides and everything else. And I was able to save those plants, and I was able to, in the end, have lots and lots of Chinese noodle beans and green beans, and it worked out very well. Now, the year prior to that, the 2018 garden, that was a big year. That was going to be our first really big garden. Now, I've had all different sorts of gardens over the years, generally on a smaller scale. I even had a container garden when we were active duty Army, living in Army housing. Couldn't have a real garden of any kind, so I had potatoes growing in Rubbermaid bins. I had corn growing in self-watering pots, and my entire back patio and little postage stamp of a backyard was nothing but things growing. I was able to can tomato sauce, I was able to grow herbs, so there was plenty that I could do still in that little bitty garden patch. So if you're wanting to garden and you don't have a lot of space, there's always something that you can grow, even if it's just growing your own herbs in a flower box. So I don't want you to feel that just because you don't have acreage that you can't have a garden. You absolutely can. But the 2018 garden was going to be the first really big, wow, let's do this kind of garden. And I was so excited. I had several different kinds of tomatoes. We had like 4 different kinds of corn. We had butternut squash and zucchini and all different things that we had out there in the garden. And I was so excited and so full of anticipation for that garden year. But then just as my garden was taking off, just as everything was really getting established, and right about the time that I would go out there and start mulching everything and just wait for all of that wonderful produce to start appearing, the worst thing possible could happen. I had this freak accident and I contracted a horrible, rare illness, and I was down for weeks. I was so incredibly sick. It was all I could do to function and maintain my home. Some days I couldn't. And getting out in the garden and working in the garden was out of the question. And so here I was, my first big garden, so excited, and I couldn't do anything. But all I could do was sit back and watch as plant after plant was devoured by tomato hornworms, as the squash bugs came in and everything else, and my garden was just destroyed. Now, to most people, that garden would be considered a failure, and in a way, in my heart, it felt like one. However, even though we weren't able to really see that garden all the way through, even though it was neglected and abandoned and just left to its own devices, we still reaped some benefits from that garden. Not only did I get the wonderful time out there in the sunshine and the fresh air and had my passion for gardening just ignited, but we also had some takeaways from that garden. We figured out that the long beds running this way down through the garden wasn't going to work, because we had all these rows going this way, but most of the time I water by hand, and so I'm coming in with the water hose. It would come in from the end, and so I found myself working against the garden beds that were in there. And so having that year, we knew that those garden beds needed to be going the other way, perpendicular to where we had them set up. So that was knowledge that we reaped. So there were things like that that we were able to reap from that garden, even if we weren't able to reap a whole lot to bring into the house to enjoy. Now, despite all that, despite the almost total loss of the big garden, there were still things we were able to harvest. There were cucumber plants that just produced like crazy, and Mr. Smith had all the cucumbers he could possibly want or eat. And so we still were able to have some benefits like that from that garden, even though most people would have considered it a failure. But having that really rough year, having that challenge and that adversity that I had to overcome only made me more excited about the garden this year. And so I took the things that I learned from that garden and I learned from that experience and I put it towards the 2019 garden. One of the very first things we did was, of course, move the orientation of the garden beds so that we were working with the water hose instead of against the water hose. And the 2019 garden was the most rewarding, fulfilling garden I've had ever. Despite the challenges of the warm winter and the early onset of pests, you know, there's always going to be challenges. There's really nothing in life that is worth anything if you don't have to work for it. And being out there and working from sun up to sundown and sweating by the gallons, I loved it. I mean, I always knew that I wanted to garden. I always knew I wanted to be able to grow food and all of that. But I never in my wildest dreams imagined how much I would get out of it. It is soul nourishing. It's one of those things that I have trouble finding the words to express just what it does for me on the inside. To be out there in the garden, to have my hands in the soil and dirt crammed up under my fingernails, and to prune the tomato plants and go after the squash bugs. There is just something about it. You know, God planted a garden and he walked with Adam and Eve in a garden, and you feel so close to the Creator when you're out there. Now, one of my favorite chores in the world has always been mowing the lawn. Out here it's mowing the pasture, because you're cut off. Even though there's all of this noise around you, it's a quiet time because you're cut off from everything around you. You're cut off from the world, and all you have is what is right in here. And I will spend a lot of that time praying and worshiping and being in the garden. As much as I love the mowing, there is just something even more special and even more fulfilling about having that quiet time out in the garden. So if you are wanting to have a garden, but you are afraid you're going to fail at it, do it anyways. Do it anyways, because you will have this wonderful experience and you will reap knowledge. You will reap the benefits, and each year, every year there's going to be something that you struggle with. It doesn't matter if you're a master gardener or a novice. There's always going to be challenges every single year, whether it's pests or the weather or blight or anything else. There's always going to be challenges to overcome, and that is what makes it worth it. So I just want to encourage you, don't hesitate if gardening is something that you long to do, even if you can only do it in Rubbermaid bins on the back patio. I just wanted to share that with all of you. I hope this encourages you, and I'm getting excited for garden season this year. It'll be even better than last year, even if everything fails. So thanks for hanging out with me here at the homestead. I hope you have a wonderful rest every week, and I will talk to y'all next time. What? What? What you doing? What? You're sleeping in my sweater? Yeah? 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 Hi, baby.